Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue our discussion on AD&D, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. When we last left off, we were talking about combat, of course, and talking about using it in the way that a Dungeon Master would. Now let's talk about special attacks, because traditionally these special attacks are going to be used by NPCs, monsters, creatures. Very rarely will people use them, but it does come up. Let's talk about charmed, or using charmed creatures. Now, a charmed creature will fight to the best of its abilities under its master's purview, whoever has effectively got it under their control. They'll use whatever weapons or abilities are appropriate to it, but they have the option of using stuff that their master would recognize. So effectively, if you've got a really powerful magic dagger, you've got an axe on your back, your master's probably going to command you to use the axe rather than the dagger, even though the dagger might be a more powerful magic weapon that you have. They wouldn't know about that. Now, there are some limitations on charm, of course. First, I want to mention an important limitation: charming a wizard or another spellcaster. This is dangerous, because the spellcasters don't have a lot of the discretion that you want them to, so if you command them to use a spell, there's a 25% chance that when they use the spell, they're going to use it on themselves, and often you as the master. So effectively, they might just blow themselves up, including you, with their whatever magic they're using. Now, there are two other limitations that are very important to mention. The first one is a charmed creature cannot take any kind of action that requires individual initiative. You can't order them to do something that they would have to make a decision for. They're not going to do it properly. You need to actually give them some directions on what they're going to do. The other one is you need to be able to communicate with them. If you're a monster that has an innate charm ability, like a vampire, you have a mental command over the person you're charming. If you're someone that casts a charm spell, you have to either be able to speak their language, or you have to have some kind of like hand gestures to mention to them, oh, go do that, or go do that. Now let's talk about creatures with a gaze attack. Gaze attacks is something that it has an ability that it looks at you, and when your eyes meet, it has an effect. Now, once you encounter one and you're looking full on, or if you get into a surprise with it, you're automatically getting hit with this gaze. You're going to be affected by whatever this gaze is. Now, if you're fighting it in a group, you only have to worry about the ones that are front of the group that are affecting it. Those that are to the sides or behind are not going to be affected by the gaze. Now, when you're fighting something that does have a gaze, you do have a couple of options. You can first try to avert your eyes. This means that you only get a 20% chance. You're effectively like looking down, not doing it, and you'd have to check that 20% chance that you're meeting the gaze. You're not negating it completely, but you're not directly looking full on. The other is to avert your eyes completely, like cover your eyes, close them, whatever. With this, though, you effectively are blind and have to be under the effects of being blinded. Now, you could use a reflective surface to look at them, but this has a few requirements. First off, you need to have some kind of light in order to use a reflective surface. And then you get some disadvantages for fighting with it. To like look through something to see it's something as a gaze. You get -2 to your attacks, and you do not get your shield or dex bonus to your AC when you're doing this, because you're just not paying attention to them directly. Now let's move on to innate magical abilities. Innate magical abilities are abilities that either function exactly like a spell or function like a spell. Traditionally, this means that the creature has an ability to use a spell. It requires none of the normal components to cast a spell. They just sort of do it. Now, traditionally, some of them might make hand motions just because it's something like you want to point at whatever you're doing something to, but they don't need to. They don't need to say anything. They don't need to point. They can just do them. Now, unless it's mentioned, you're going to assume the hit dice of whatever the creature you're doing is used as the caster level for this effect. Otherwise, it will tell you whatever the caster level for this innate ability is, whether it's directly mimicking a spell, or if it's doing something else that's very like a spell. Now, let's talk about breath weapons. This is something like what a dragon's breath would be. It's a cone area of damage or affecting kind of gas spreading from a dragon, hitting any targets within its area. You're going to have to make a save versus breath weapon, oftentimes to either try to avoid it or to take half the effects of whatever it would be. It's going to tell you under the breath weapon what the difference will be, if whether you're just taking half damage for being successful for it or avoiding the effects of it completely. Now let's talk about special defenses. In particular, let's start talking about saves or saving throws. It's a dice we are going to roll in order to either avoid or lessen the effects of something coming at you that's going to affect you in a negative manner. Now you'd roll a d20. You'd have to get either equal or greater than the number whatever your save is, and this is going to depend on both your level and your class. If you would have multiple classes, you would use the best one for whatever your various classes are. When we talk about monsters and saving throws, different things come up, like non-intelligent monsters would react differently than more intelligent ones. They would maybe not have to necessarily make certain saves depending on them, for one thing, if it's not something that would affect them. Those non-intelligent ones are going to be treated as a warrior and use their hit dice instead of level for figuring out what their saves are. Other monsters are more open. If one should have spellcasting, you would look to having it if it's either warrior or wizard. So you're going to look at each monster and break it down in which one of these charts, equivalent to a class, it would get for its own saves. Now, the thing is, you can always choose to fail a save. You do not need to roll even if you don't want to. You can just be like, oh, I don't roll at all. There are also times that you could have ability scores used in place of saves. Effectively, that would be more of a target number for situations that would determine how that would work with your saves. Effectively, you maybe need to roll your dexterity rather than your whatever save it is if it's appropriate to certain situations. Now, there are a number of modifiers that can affect your saves too. That can either add bonuses or penalties depending on the circumstance that's going on. Things like magic armor, magic items, maybe possibly spells, could also give bonuses or penalties to your saves, affecting them. It is also up to your game master that at their discretion they can either add up to +4 or up to -4, depending on the situation, to the save you're going to roll, basically giving a situational modifier to what's going on with you. Though this is used sparingly and only in extreme situations where it seems appropriate to use it, it's not something your game master is going to do on an average basis. So that's it for today. I introduced you to the special attacks creatures could use. Manipulating charmed creatures, having a gaze attack, innate magical abilities, and breath weapons. I then moved on to starting to talk about special defenses, talking about your saving throws and giving the basics of them. In the next episode, I'm going to finish up talking about spell defenses and move on to talking about morale. So if any questions, comments, anything you say, anything you think I left out, please leave it in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the Empire, and the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you could always check out my Patreon, link to the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.